Hi everyone! With the release of Tenet quickly approaching, I decided to review Christopher Nolan's first feature film from 1998, Following. Now before we get started, there's a few things I want to mention that are going to be coming to the channel pretty quickly. The first is that at the time of filming this video, I'm actually going to be seeing Tenet in just a few hours. So be sure to look for a review for that in the pretty near future. The second thing that I'm working on is my first series review. I'm very excited about that. I just finished binge watching a show, and I'm very excited to talk about that on here. If you'd like to, you can guess in the comments what you think that one might be. And the third thing I want to mention is that with Wonder Woman 1984 coming out at the beginning of October, and it probably won't change, especially since more and more theaters are opening up. And also with DC's Fandom event that they had just about a week or so ago, I will be watching through and reviewing all of the DCEU movies. So those reviews will be going up consecutively throughout this month. That concludes my brief advertisement about my channel. Now, let's get into the actual video. So I don't think I mentioned it on here before, but Christopher Nolan is my absolute favorite writer and director of all time. I love each and every one of his movies, with Inception being my favorite, and perhaps at some point I may rank them from my least best to most best, or something like that. But for now, I thought it would be fun and fitting to take a look at his first feature film before his latest one is released and reviewed by me. So without further ado, let's take a look at Following. Following is a 1998 crime thriller written and directed by Christopher Nolan and stars Jeremy Theobald and Alex Haw. The movie follows... You see what I did there? It's pretty good, huh? It follows a writer who decides to follow people at random for material. While doing this, he meets a thief who takes him under his wing. Now, before I get into this review, feel free, if you've seen Following, to let me know down in the comments what you thought about the movie, because I'm definitely interested to hear what other people have to say about this film. Now, let's start with the good aspects of the movie. The best part of the film for me was definitely how the story was told in order to best fit the mystery of the film. Now, anyone who has watched Nolan before knows that he isn't exactly a fan of telling stories in a linear fashion all the time. And this is a fantastic beginning to that type of storytelling for Nolan. And it so benefits from that because the audience experiences the same introduction and naivety that the main character does as we enter into this new world of thievery. The jumps in between time also create a feeling of uncertainty that runs through the film. As it jumps back and forth between different points in the story, the audience isn't really sure what to think about the characters that come into play, because we don't know what their role is going to be in other sections of the story or where their background is previously. We just know them right now as being where they're introduced, and so that makes you a little bit unsure of everyone. Another thing that this non-linear style adds to the mystery is, as I said before, the mystery of the movie, and I'll expand on that. Though the movie only runs at about an hour and 10 minutes, Following has no shortage of twists and turns. Every time the movie cuts to a different time in the story, we find out more about who the characters truly are and what their real motives are. All this leads to the film being unpredictable and fresh throughout. The next good aspect that I really appreciate about this film is the dialogue throughout. Now, I always love Nolan's scripts. They're extremely creative and original, and I think they're fantastic. However, more of his more popular movies and more of those scripts, such as Inception or Interstellar, can be more focused on exposition and explaining the rules of those worlds. And I think that's good, but I think in this movie, Nolan really is able to show off just how good he is at writing dialogue, because this movie doesn't have any world to set up. It's just in our normal real world. And so we get to see that Nolan is really a good writer of dialogue and back and forth conversation. And it's something that I really never noticed until watching this movie. When the characters talk, it always feels like the conversation really moves quickly and it goes at a fast pace. They always have something to say back to each other. It can be witty, or it can just be that the characters have a good chemistry because of the dialogue that they're given. This definitely adds excitement and intrigue into parts that aren't necessarily impressive on a visual level. Also, on the positive side of things for this movie is its direction. Now, like I said before, Nolan equals best director. But in Following, there is so much happening in each shot and each scene, and that's required for this to keep the story moving forward. Everything that is shown matters. It comes into play either right then in the movie or later. And what Nolan is able to do, which I think in part is due to the restrictions that he had, is to place so many small details about the characters and the surrounding just all over the movie, that would come to play a part in the story at one point or another. This starts from the very opening shots as we see, a box of items that we later learn is of very great importance. This film is riddled with things like that everywhere. And the last positive thing that I want to note for this movie is not necessarily about the movie itself, but rather more about the making of the movie. Now, if you don't know the history of it, I'll give you a short biography of that, if you will. Now, Nolan was able to create Following on a budget of just $6,000. Now, for those of you who may not know, in terms of film budgets, this is almost nothing. Like, a lot of films have budgets in the millions and hundred millions of dollars. But Nolan and his group of friends that he used to help in this movie were able to do all of the writing, all the directing, all of the acting, and all of the editing and all of everything on an almost nothing budget. Now, to do that is something great in and of itself, but to do something this well, I'm a fan of the movie itself, if you couldn't already tell. It's just so fantastic to me. I think it's just very cool to see a filmmaker and a team of friends just so dedicated to getting the story across and getting it across well, that even when they have no money to do it, they are able to succeed. It gives me great respect for all the people involved, and even more respect than I already had for Nolan to begin with. But unfortunately, we do have to go into the bad aspects, and I think there were a few in this movie. And as good as Following is, it is still, in my opinion, Nolan's weakest work. I think a lot of that has to do with the limitations of his budget. I know I just got done talking about how I appreciate what he was able to do with what he had, but that doesn't mean that all of it was as good as it could have been. So the first negative that comes to mind is that there were a number of times where I wasn't necessarily sure where we were at in the story. Now, I get that that's part of what's supposed to happen when you tell it in a non-linear way and the timeline jumps from place to place in a movie. But these instances that I can think of were not the good kind, if you will, not the ones that were designed to make you a little bit confused. These were times when it felt like the film was a little bit more sloppily edited, which then contributed to unintended confusion. And I think that's just because they didn't have the budget to edit it, super professionally, but still, it led to confusion that I didn't like. It took me away from the film a little bit. Another negative that I didn't like about the movie was the acting. Now, I get that a lot of the actors are Nolan's friends or family members, and so they're not professionals in any way. However, that does not mean that the poorer quality of the performances didn't take away from the movie, because they did. I thought the person who played the young man, the protagonist, he was okay. He did an all right job, but I think everyone else either overacted their part or fell flat. And that bothered me a little bit. Fortunately, the story was executed well enough that the performances didn't distract me or take me too much out of it, because the story kept it moving along nicely. And I think my last critique of this film is that there were times when I felt like it could have just slowed down just a little. Sometimes a scene would end and the next cut just picked right up, and move the story to a different place than we were just at. And I think it did it rather abruptly, and that bothered me a little bit. I think that at times, not always, but at times, the movie could have benefited from slowing down a bit and allowing the audience to readjust to the new direction that we were going to move in. And it could have done this just a bit more gradually. Now, to close this up, overall, I thought Following was a fantastic thriller and a wonderful introduction to Christopher Nolan's career. I would recommend it to anyone, even with the flaws that it had, especially other Nolan fans or fans of just really good, twisty crime thrillers. To give it a score, I'd give it an 81%, and if you have the time, please go and check this one out. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I greatly appreciate each and every one of the viewers. Now, this has been a legit review of Following.